Have you ever wondered what the Old Testament story is all about? And how does the Old Testament relate to the New Testament? What is the Old Testament pointing us towards? And how does it relate to the coming of Jesus Christ? Stay tuned and find out more about how the Old Testament points us forward to God's promises. Hello everyone, my name is J.C. Basinger. I'm the lead pastor of Hope Community Church. We are a church plant in Queen Creek. And we are doing this series on how do we understand the Bible and how do we understand the story of Scripture. And as you'll look on the screen there are 6 scenes or 6 acts rather of the story of the Bible. We've talked about Scene 1 and creation, or Act 1 being creation. We've talked about Act 2, rebellion. And today we're going to talk about Act 3, which is promise. If we can divide Act 3, promise, into 2 scenes, the first scene is really leading up to the land and preparing a people for the land. And what we're going to see is that God promises to save his people. In Act 2, we saw rebellion, that Adam and Eve turned against God and that they decided to pursue their own way rather than pursue God's way. And that sin had consequences. It separated mankind from God. They were removed from the garden. Also, it caused conflict interpersonally, that Adam and Eve blamed each other. And finally, there was toil, or creation became toilsome. It was difficult. But we see that God continued to keep his promise. In Genesis 6 through 9, we see the story of Abraham. And sin, and really the rebellion against God, had reached a pinnacle, a high point, where God was going to judge sin. And we see in that passage, or the series of passages, the consequence of our rebellion, the consequence of sin. So the Lord judges his people with a flood. But we also see the promise in God's grace, that God rescues one man and his family. He rescues Noah. But as Noah exits the ark and begins to recreate by being fruitful and multiplying, sin still remains. And in Genesis 11, people are trying to become God. They attempt to build a structure, a building, a temple that is able to reach the heavens. Now, of course, they're not able to do that. And in Genesis 11, God actually has to come down. It's kind of a mocking tone that God had to come down to see what people were up to. And because of that, God confuses the languages and people are forced to spread throughout the world. But God doesn't end there. You see, God could have left us in a rebellion. He could have not done any overtures or any acts of grace to rescue us, but God keeps his promise. And in Genesis 12, God calls Abram, who becomes Abraham, and he gives him a task. We see this in Genesis 12. I'm going to read it. Genesis 12, 1 through 3. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. And I will make you a great nation. And I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless those, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." Now, for somebody in this culture in the ancient Near East to leave their homeland to another land was really unheard of. But Abraham's faith was rooted in God and his promises. And we see several promises God makes. One, he's going to make him a great nation. He's going to bless him. He's going to make his name great. He's going to be a blessing to others. He's going to bless those who bless him, curse those who curse him, and through him, all the nations of the earth, every nation, will be blessed. That is a promise pointing forward to a future scenario, a future time where Jesus will be the fulfillment of that promise. And what we see here, a covenant is made, an agreement that God is going to do something for his people. We see here a promise, and a promise is really rooted in God making covenants or agreements with his people. It's a bond that's made. And God promises people, place, and presence in his covenants. That God's going to make him a nation, that God's going to be with him, and that God is going to give him a place, a land. Go to the land I will show you. So then we enter in the period of Genesis and the patriarchs. We have Isaac. We have Jacob. We have Joseph. And Genesis ends with Israel going into Egypt because of a famine. And then the story picks up in Exodus. In Exodus, Pharaoh, the ruler of Egypt, had forgotten Joseph. And God's people become enslaved, and they're enslaved for a long time, over 400 years. They're tired of being enslaved. They cry out to him, and God acts. He remembers or acts towards his covenant. And in doing so, he raises up Moses. Moses was a prophet and a deliverer. He is the one who went to Pharaoh and spoke the words that God spoke to Moses. The final plague God uses is devastating. The firstborn males are killed, but God offers grace for Israel, that if they cover their doors with blood of an unblemished lamb, that the angel of death would pass over their home. This is protection, this is grace, this is mercy for the people of God. And the plague is so severe that Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, releases God's people, frees them, tells them to go. And afterwards, they sojourn in the wilderness for 40 years. In the midst of the wilderness, God makes another covenant with his people. He gives them a law to follow. As a result of God's freeing his people, he is a redeemer, he is a liberator. And he enters into a covenant with his people. In that covenant, he offers 10 commandments and several applications to those commandments. He also offers his presence. In doing so, they build a tabernacle or a place for God to dwell amongst his people. And he promises a land, a place for them to be, and forms a people, a nation for them. We see in Leviticus that God issues regulations, how to be a people that are holy. And really, what does it mean to be in God's presence? Who is worthy to be in God's presence? And the answer is that nobody is worthy in themselves. But God does offer a way. He offers a day of atonement and sacrifices to restore fellowship when sin has occurred, when fellowship has been broken. In the next book, we see in the book of Numbers, 3 major breaks or 3 major steps. The first is that there is a census in preparation for entering the new land. The second is that spies come from scouting out the land and give a bad report that there are giants in the land and there's no way that we can overtake them, that we can conquer them. And the third is that a census is given, and really a preparation for the next generation to come into the land. Then we have Deuteronomy, which is a second giving of the law, and this is meant to penetrate the heart of God's people. And we see really the handing over of leadership from Moses to Joshua. Hey, I want to thank everyone for watching. If you would do me a favor and like this video, if you're not a subscriber to our channel, I'd appreciate it if you would subscribe so you can see when we upload more content. Also, leave a comment below. Let me know how these videos are helping you. And if you would like other videos, leave a comment below. Thanks so much for watching.